Agreement. And I'm sitting here, and let me explain to you why I'm sitting here so frustrated. Because I'm the only one in this room who's wore a green uniform and been on that line. I'm the only one in this room that found dead aliens on a trail that were abandoned by smugglers who just left them there because they weren't worth any money anymore. I'm the only one in this room that stood in the back of tractor trailers surrounded by 19 dead aliens, including a 5-year-old little boy that suffocated in death in his father's arms. I was there, and I saw it, and I smelled it, and it's terrible. And I still have nightmares to this day. I was in Phoenix, Arizona when you couldn't pay the smuggling fees. You were tortured. One person was stabbed in the face 22 times because you couldn't pay a smuggling fee. And we keep talking about open borders, abolish ICE, let's not detain anybody, let's let everybody go. That entices more people to come.
Exactly.
This isn't just about enforcing laws, it's about saving lives. I found enough dead bodies in my day. I got a stack of dead bodies here. I've seen a lot of pictures today, but no one wants to see these pictures because they're angel moms and dads. These children died here at the hands of people that crossed the border because we have an open border. The more we entice people to make this journey, more women, 31% of women are being raped. Children are dying. And I said months ago, if we don't close the loopholes, more women will be raped, more children will die. But it's like no one's listening.
Well, Mr. Homan,
we can fix this, sir. We can fix this. There's 3 things we can do to fix this. In Congress, if they don't like what ICE and CBP do, then do your job. Fix it. Congress has failed American people for 3 decades. I've been doing this job and fixing this. They'd rather point to the men and women of the Border Patrol, men and women of ICE who have an American flag on their shoulder and serve their nation. I'm extremely frustrated because what I've seen today is misleading the American people. People are dying, not in ICE custody. If you compare people that died in ICE custody to every state, federal system, we got the lowest rate. We got a hell of a lot lower rate than the city of New York. But no one wants to talk about this. We need to save lives. We need to secure our borders. Nothing.
We come now to Thomas Homan, who is the former acting director of the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Sir, my statement is going to take about 6 minutes. I appreciate leeway since other panel members had up to 7 minutes.
All right, go for it.
Chairman Cummings, Ranking Member Jordan, and members of the committee, it is a privilege to appear before you today, and thank you for this invitation. I have spent 34 years enforcing immigration laws. I started my career in 1984 as a Border Patrol agent, then as a special agent, and climbed the ranks one step at a time to become the acting ICE director. I have conducted and oversaw criminal investigations in the alien.
The gentleman will suspend for just a moment. We're not allowed to have graphic poster displays during testimony of witnesses. Okay, thank you.
I have conducted and oversaw criminal investigations into alien smuggling, human trafficking, immigration fraud, narcotics trafficking, gun trafficking, and human trafficking, child predator crimes, and other customs-related offenses. As the Executive Associate Director of ICE, I oversaw all interior enforcement operations to include arrests, detention, and removal of those illegally in the United States in order removed by an immigration judge.
Forgive me, Mr. Homan. The gentleman will suspend. Officer, the people who were doing that are allowed to stay if they agree not to do any more poster demonstrations. So just let them know that, and they can quietly be readmitted. Very good. Mr. Homan, your time will be compensated for. Thanks.
I retired on January 27, 2017, was asked on that same day to postpone my retirement and serve as the acting director of ICE by the President of the United States. It was a great honor. I stayed and served for another 1.5 years to my second retirement on June 30th, 2018. With more than 3 decades of immigration enforcement experience, I'm extremely concerned about the growing risk to our nation's public safety, security, rule of law, and that is all due to illegal immigration. What is happening on our southern border is unprecedented in several ways. The composition of those entering illegally is unprecedented because 70% of those are either family units or unaccompanied children. It is also unprecedented that a majority of those crossing are abusing the asylum laws and making fraudulent claims to asylum and are exploiting the loopholes that Congress has refused to close. Also unprecedented is the attack and vilification of the American patriots that serve this nation as Border Patrol agents, ICE officers, and agents. The biggest problem involves the unwillingness of Congress to address the loopholes that are causing this crisis. I and many others have spent the last 2 years saying what needs to be done not only to protect our borders, enforce the law in a meaningful way, but to also save lives. However, those calls for action have fallen on deaf ears because there's no more interest in fixing this problem. It's about open borders agenda, resisting our president, more interest in that than securing our border. This should not be a partisan issue. I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat, you should want to secure our border. There's no downside on having a secure border. There is no downside on having less illegal immigration. There is no downside on less illegal drugs coming in this country. There is no downside in stopping the bankrolling criminal cartels in Mexico that smuggle both people and drugs. After all, Border Patrol and ICE are merely enforcing the laws enacted by Congress. The past few weeks, the attacks on the Border Patrol have swelled. The media and some in Congress want to say that those in the Border Patrol custody are mistreated. The holding facilities are overcrowded and there are not enough showers. The DHS Inspector General also said the facilities are overcrowded, which in turn affects the quality of care within the facility. However, this should be no surprise to anyone. Border Patrol leadership and acting DHS Secretary McAleenan have been warning Congress for months that this system is overwhelmed and that more funds are needed so these people can be moved quickly to a more appropriate facility designed for them. The same people that vilify the Border Patrol for detention conditions are the same people that refuse to answer their call for help until it's too late. I find it disheartening that no one here, I've heard today, wants to talk about the 4,000 lives that the Border Patrol saved last year. Over 4,000 people that were found by Border Patrol agents in dire straits that may have perished if it wasn't for the heroic efforts of these agents. No one talks about how these men and women bring toys from their home and their own children to these facilities so the migrant children will have something to play with. No one talks about the sicknesses of these migrants and how these agents take that sickness home to their own families because of that exposure. No one wants to talk about how these agents have to go through TB screening constantly because they've been exposed to that serious illness. No one wants to talk about how these men and women who care for these children that cross illegally into this country, I'm talking about unaccompanied alien children now, cross into this country in the hands of criminal organizations that were abandoned by their own families. No one wants to talk about that. No one wants to talk about how these Border Patrol agent mom and dads console these children, and it's disgraceful. Finally, I want to address the unprecedented attack and vilification on men and women of ICE and the Border Patrol. These men and women who chose a life of service to this nation deserve better, not only from the media, from those here in this committee and other members of Congress. These men and women who chose life of service deserve more. These men and women are working in extremely difficult environments and dealing with an extraordinary influx of vulnerable people. They are doing the best they can under the circumstances. As a 34-year veteran of law enforcement, it is shocking to see the constant attacks against those that leave the safety and security of their homes every day, put on a Kevlar vest and put a gun on their hip and risk their own safety to defend this nation. Those that attack the professional integrity of those that serve and blatantly throw unsubstantiated allegations against these men and women with zero evidence of guilt are wrong and should be ashamed. Most of these allegations will be found to be untrue after extensive investigation, but it's too late when that happens because the damage has been done. The agency has been tarnished, in the spirit of the men and women that serve are many times broken, their morale is at an all-time low. They have to wake up every day and see news reports and comments from representatives in Congress that they're Nazis, white supremacists, that they operate concentration camps, that they knowingly abuse women and children. Those that make those outrageous statements believe that once you decide to carry an ICE badge or a Border Patrol badge, that you lose all sense of humanity. They think that no longer these people have a heart or they care about other people. ICE agents and Border Patrol agents are mom and dads too. They have children. What they see every day in this unprecedented surge of children and families affects them deeply and emotionally. It is something they're going to deal with every day and will stay with them the rest of their lives. Over half of Border Patrol agents are of Latin descent, and to say that they abuse those from Central America with no evidence of abuse is just plain wrong and insulting to those that have to endure this crisis each and every day. I ask this. Has any of those who easily attack the men and women of the Border Patrol ICE, you ever walked up to one and thanked one for serving their nation? Have you ever walked up to one and thanked them for putting their lives on the line every day for this country? Have you ever attended the honor burial of a Border Patrol agent or ICE agent that died during their job, died for this country? Have you ever had to console a small child or a spouse of a fallen officer? I have, too many times. Have any of these people want to attack the Border Patrol and ICE? Have you ever walked the walls of the National Law Enforcement Memorial just down the street and see 21,000 names of men and women that made the ultimate sacrifice for this country, which includes hundreds of Border Patrol agents and ICE agents and their legacy agencies? These agents deserve better from the representatives of Congress. With that, I'll be available for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Homan, for your testimony.
And I agree with Mr. Homan. Those agents our agents down there, they're family people too. They're human beings, they're Americans, and we shouldn't desecrate them because they're doing their job with the resources they have. And it's just unbelievable to me that this Congress took this long to pass some legislation here a week before last, $4.6 billion in humanitarian aid, which some people on this panel voted against, by the way, and it's helping. Now, Mr. Homan, what do you think with that passage of that legislation with resources, what do you anticipate, what do you think is happening?
With the supplemental funding?
Yeah, the supplemental funding.
The supplemental funding was late,
Yeah.
and that's why they had the conditions they had, but it's working. It's my understanding that now children are being moved within 72 hours as required by statute, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
No one wants a child to be locked up in a Border Patrol facility.
Yeah.
The head of the Border Patrol and the Secretary said that numerous times.
Yeah, see, that's my point. The people at the end of the day ought to get blamed here is the United States Congress for failing to act. I mean, the administration asked months ago, we got a crisis, but we heard from the other side, it's a manufactured crisis, it's not a crisis. Now it's a crisis, they're all saying that. Some of them went down the border and they saw it as a crisis. And I'm sure there's some examples of, because of the overwhelming conditions, there's problems and challenges. And I know I've seen the reports of the border agents, and Mr. Homan talked about it, where agents are bringing stuff in from their own families, out of their personal, items, personal budgets to help doing what they want, because they're human beings too. And I think sometimes we forget that. And they're really struggling right now to get this done. And I want to talk a little bit more about the Flores Amendment, settlement. Mr. Homan, what's that done to really impede to do what you can act on?
I should have been more clear in my statement. When I'm talking about Flores Settlement Agreement, when I'm talking about when the Ninth Circuit decided that they're going to limit it to 20 days, and they know that it takes about 45 days in a detained setting to see a judge. They knew it was going to happen.
Okay.
And I said what was going to happen, but I was called a fearmonger. I said, if that 20 days gets put in, you're going to see a surge of families they've never seen before. Yeah. And it's happened. I was right. And if you're really escaping death and persecution and from your home government, the only way we can guarantee you're going to see a judge, because we know the absentia rates is out of control. A lot of these families are not showing up in court, even if they file with the court. The only way we can guarantee due process is we detain them in a family residential center, which the Inspector General has inspected many times. We're not talking about Border Patrol facilities now. We're talking about a center with child psychologists, pediatricians, doctors, nurses. We're an educational program.
But you're overwhelmed, though.
Well, we don't have enough family
overwhelmed
detention beds either.
because these numbers have just gone through the roof.
But if we had a true sense of that we can guarantee people see a judge, and those who have failed their claim to asylum, because they don't fall within the rules of asylum, and send them home. And I think the surge will go down. We did it. It worked in 14 and 15 when we sent planes of people that failed their interview and failed the judge and judge order removed. When we did that, the numbers went down. So.
It must be a really challenge for the Border Patrol. These minors coming in with, obviously a lot of them with their parents, but obviously maybe not so. And I've heard reports of recycling kids, bringing back.
That's another thing I haven't heard today. When you talk about the separation that occurred at the border, when the judge first ordered the reunification of the first 112 or 102 children, no one wants to talk about 6% of those, based on DNA testing, weren't even the parents. So if you extrapolate that between the 2,700 people, how many children are reunited with someone that wasn't even their parent? That's something that's going to shock us someday.
Thank you, Mr. Comer.
I have to begin with clarifying something that Representative Tlaib said in her opening remarks when we had the portion of the hearing when the legislators were asked to give remarks for 5 minutes. Representative Tlaib, you were offended by the term illegal and said we did not need to use the term illegal to describe certain people that were here in America, that no one was an illegal. But if anyone is in the United States of America unlawfully, then they are, in fact, an illegal. And I just want to clarify that, because when I go home to Kentucky, that's something that offends the overwhelming majority of people that watch what goes on in Congress, specifically in this committee. And let me be clear, this is not a manufactured crisis. This is a problem that is getting worse every day. Yet this Congress continues to do nothing about the real problem at the border. What I have not heard today in this hearing is a real solution to the problem. Just letting people go freely when they cross the border illegally constitutes open border. We cannot have that in America. And let me quote Jay Johnson in an op-ed, and he was President Obama's Secretary of Homeland Security. He said that we cannot embrace a policy, and I quote, not deport those who enter or remain in this country illegally unless they commit a crime. This is tantamount to a public declaration, repeated and amplified by smugglers in Central America, that our borders are effectively open to all. This will increase the recent levels of monthly apprehensions at our southern border, about or more than 100,000 by multiples, end quote. He's right. President Obama's Secretary of Homeland Security is right about the real problem we have at the border. We have to get serious about this problem at the border. Mr. Homan, you're clearly an expert. What can Congress do to fix this problem?
They can close loopholes in asylum to make it meaningful. They can change the TVPRA where children in Mexico are, the children of Central America are treated the same way as children in Mexico. Once it's ascertained they're not a victim of trafficking, they can be removed. And they need to change the Flores Settlement Agreement. And I'm sitting here, and let me explain to you why I'm sitting here so frustrated. Because I'm the only one in this room that's wore a green uniform and been on that line. I'm the only one in this room that found dead aliens on a trail that were abandoned by smugglers who just left them there because they weren't worth any money anymore. I'm the only one in this room that stood in the back of a tractor trailer surrounded by 19 dead aliens, including a 5-year-old little boy that suffocated in death in his father's arms. I was there, and I saw it, and I smelled it, and it's terrible. And I still have nightmares to this day. I was in Phoenix, Arizona, when you couldn't pay the smuggling fees. You were tortured. One person was stabbed in the face 22 times because you couldn't pay a smuggling fee. And we keep talking about open borders, abolish ICE, let's not detain anybody, let's let everybody go. That entices more people to come.
Exactly.
This isn't just about enforcing laws, it's about saving lives. I found enough dead bodies in my day. I got a stack of dead bodies here. I've seen a lot of pictures today, but no one wants to see these pictures because they're angel moms and dads. These children were died here at the hands of people that crossed the border because we have an open border. The more we entice people to make this journey, more women, 31% of women are being raped. Children are dying. And I said months ago, if we don't close the loopholes, more women will be raped, more children will die. But it's like no one's listening.
Well, Mr. Homan,
we can fix this, sir. We can fix this. There's 3 things we can do to fix this. In Congress, if they don't like what ICE and CBP do, then do your job. Fix it. Congress has failed American people for 3 decades. I've been doing this job and fixing this. They'd rather point to the men and women at the border, to the men and women at ICE who have an American flag on their shoulder and serve their nation. I'm extremely frustrated because what I've seen today is misleading the American people. People are dying, not in ICE custody. If you compare people that died in ICE custody to every state, federal system, we got the lowest rate. We got a hell of a lot lower rate than the city of New York. But no one wants to talk about this. We need to save lives. We need to secure our border. There's nothing wrong with this. There's nothing wrong with a secure border.
Well, I can assure you, Mr. Homan, this side of the aisle is serious about securing the border. The President's serious about securing the border, and I hope that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle will get serious about securing the border so we can have a real solution to the problem that we have at the southern border. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Homan, I want to clarify a couple of things because you mentioned earlier that no one's been to the law enforcement memorial. I'm from a law enforcement family, 100% from a law enforcement family, and I represent Border Patrol agents, and I represent agents that work for ICE. And I don't believe that it is the agents that are solely responsible for any of this that's happening. I don't think that that's the case. And as far as the law enforcement memorial goes, I was there just a few weeks ago because I have family that's on that. So I want you to know that the questions that I'm asking have nothing to do with blaming the agents who are working on the front lines. But I do think that it's important that we talk about the policy, and the policy that is still problematic, because I believe that while we do have this crisis of people who are coming here, I believe honestly that they're coming out of desperation. They're hugely being taken advantage of by criminals, by traffickers, by people who are willing to leave them to die anywhere. That is all true. We're not arguing there. But there are policies in place here within the United States of America that go against our values. And one of those is family separation. So I want to talk to you about your beliefs on family separation. And you've been on the record defending President Trump's policy of separating families at the border many times. Can you clarify how you feel about that today?
No, I cannot. As you recognize in your report here, it's under litigation. I'm a part of that litigation, and I've been instructed by the attorneys that I'm not allowed to speak about that other than in a courtroom setting, which this is not.
Okay, so that's fine. So you have said, though, that you believe that families should be held indefinitely until they have a court hearing.
Well, court hearing and definitely two different things. I think they should be held long enough to see a judge in a family residential center.
Family residential center.
It worked in FY14, FY15.
Okay, but you cannot comment at all about family separation right now.
Well, I was the director of ICE. If anybody was separate, they're separate on the border by another agency.
Okay, well, you have been on the record many times defending that policy. But I also want to point out that on June 14th, President Trump told Fox and Friends that you, Tom Homan, will be returning to the Trump administration as the border czar. Is that true?
I have not accepted any position with the administration.
Well, yes, as of 4 days ago, you said that you haven't accepted a position yet, but you also said that if I can help this president, I certainly will.
If I can help my country, like I've done for the last 34 years, I come back from retirement once, I'm not going to say never.
You didn't say help my country, you said help this president.
Well, helping this president is helping my country. He's the president of the United States.
Okay, is it true that you are a Fox News contributor and have been since your retirement?
Yes.
Okay. And is it also true that on your LinkedIn profile, one of your key achievements was that you removed 369,000 aliens from the United States?
Probably.